town, take a stand, sing louder than guns, more powerful than bullets flying. It's the voice rising up, saying it's about damn time we put the last nail in the coffin, we put the last body in the ground, calling on every town shout, louder than guns. Baby, I'm thriving. Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Dr. Indre Viskontas for One Mind, and I'm a neuroscientist working at the intersection of music and health and well-being. I'm also an opera singer and a stage director myself, and today I'm joined by a fellow musician who's using his voice and platform as a country music star to address one of the most sobering and urgent topics in our country today, America's obsession with guns. Ketch Secor is a Grammy-Award winning musician, founding member of Old Crow Medicine Show, who makes his home in Nashville, Tennessee. Ketch, thanks so much for being here, and I hear you're going to kick us off with a brand new song.
Here it comes, Indre. Thank you. Woke up this morning, it was Groundhog Day. I saw the same black veil on a crying face and a flag flying halfways. This time it was people I know, gunned down in a minute or so. Only God knows when it'll stop, but these thoughts and prayers ain't enough. Louder than guns, more powerful than bullets flying. It's the voice rising up, saying it's about time we put the last nail in the coffin, we put the last body in the ground, calling on every town to shout, louder than guns. There's a law on a dusty scroll from a feather pen. It says every man's right to defend shall not be infringed. Well, this time I don't agree. Any man could have his own army. More than an American child should live in sweet harmony, sing louder than guns, more powerful than bullets flying. It's the voice rising up, saying it's about time we put the last nail in the coffin, we put the last body in the ground. We're calling on every town to shout, louder than guns. Oh, I don't want to wake up on another Groundhog Day. No, I don't want to hear another rat-a-tat-tat-tat echo down the hallway. Freedom's just another word for letting every voice be heard. Every heart, every hand, every town, take a stand, sing louder than guns, more powerful than bullets flying. It's the voice rising up, saying it's about damn time we put the last nail in the coffin, we put the last body in the ground, calling on every town shout, louder than guns.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. It has such an, upbeat tempo to it. And I feel like a lot of the conversations we have around gun violence after a shooting are somber. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the creation of this particular song?
Well, I've been writing a lot lately because when the shooting happened in my town, it just really hit me hard. And usually when I get that way, I do a lot of writing. I write a lot of letters and emails, and I call a lot of people, and I'll write songs too. So I just find it's an important kind of cathartic way to process the things that are happening, to find the power in words to make sense about things. I think it might come from being a child and feeling having learned as a kid that when you're scared, you pray. And that concept of a lamentation, I think, is pretty interwoven in the way that I process grief.
You know, you wrote this very heartfelt and moving op-ed in the New York Times about the confluence of gun culture, the South, and country music. And you proposed the idea that country musicians might be able to help lead the way towards change. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about why you started speaking about this now, or has this always been a part of your platform, and the New York Times being a big step up in terms of getting it to an audience that goes even beyond your own fans, or whether, this moment in particular, was it this last incident in Nashville that really has incited you to act?
Yeah, that's right, Indre. As soon as the shooting happened in Nashville, just a few moments passed before I knew that I had to say something and share the fact that I was grieving with my audience. And it's a bit of it's the challenge here is that I'm not a mainstream country artist, with a whole bunch of trucks that have the name of my tour on the side of it, rolling to your town to play an arena. I might go play a theater in your town, and I might, sell a tenth of what those artists are selling at the merchandise table or the. I'm just recognizing that when this comes to Nashville is uniquely poised in the potential of its response. And one of the ways that we as a music community can come together is to be responsive because of our position here with an audience that's oftentimes more conservative than we are.
I think the science really backs up the idea that often musicians help us work through our emotions. It's a way of processing how it is that we feel when we're grieving. We turn to music almost in every single culture to sort of really get over those feelings to essentially, it's a type of therapy that we do for ourselves. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how country singers especially can serve as these emotional role models in a culture where sometimes expressing our feelings is not so mainstream.
Well, the way that what we're calling gun culture is interwoven into the American South and as much the South as just rural America and the people who identify with the country music demographic. There's a considerable overlap with that group from I love country, I live in a rural place, I believe strongly in the Second Amendment, and my definition of it is is immovable. So that sort of unique stubbornness represents a body politic in the music, because that's who buys a lot of these records and comes out to see those shows. After the shooting happened, I could imagine a world that, I thought that it was a really important challenge to see just what our musicians are capable of. These are people, we are a body of singers and songwriters and musicians who have an incredible reach into these communities directly. And I could imagine us rising to the challenge, similarly to the ways in which people in the American South, who it never dawned on them in the era of segregation and desegregation, that there was something spiritually, morally, culturally wrong about dividing people because of the color of their skin. I think we're living in a moment when people are also going to look back on their grandparents' generation and say they were living in a time in which there was a moral and spiritual wrongness being committed as a culture about the accessibility to military-grade weapons in the United States.
You noted in your op-ed that Old Crow Medicine Show's big hit Wagon Wheel is often blasted from pickup trucks that have NRA stickers on their bumpers. Do you have a sense of why that hit in particular might resonate with people who support gun rights? Or, I don't know, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think even when I wrote that song, when I was a 17-year-old kid in school, I thought, well, this is going to be a hit. I thought for sure this would be my swan song. I'll be lauding this one for the rest of my life. And I think there's just something about a good song. To me, it's a song about freedom and about taking the initiative to go get that freedom yourself. It's funny that I wrote that song in New Hampshire, where as a new owner of a driver's license, I was encountering constantly a state motto: "Live free or die." And New Hampshire, and specifically the town that I went to high school in, Exeter, New Hampshire, is the home place and the birth, the city of birth for the Republican Party. Back in the days of the Grand Old Party, when Republicanism represented a largely business-minded northern interest, and the Democrats were all fighting down south to ensure that slavery could continue. There's been parallels all through this, through my life, that have sent me down a pathway of speaking out. I remember one of my first jobs was I was a shoe shiner. I worked in a barber shop on Saturday mornings. I grew up in Virginia, and in 1986, the United States elected its first black governor of any state, and it was Governor Douglas Wilder of the state of Virginia. Now, this was a real populist move in our state, and hearing about it as a 9-year-old in a barber shop was such a powerful way to see who our country is, because there was so much dissent about a black man being our leader among the generation that was coming in, whose shoes I was shining. And yet I knew instinctively that I loved these guys. They were going to give me $2. They smiled when I touched their feet. I was performing a service for them, and they were sharing something that was an insecurity with a kid, and in the space of the barbershop. I think when I was privy to that, I saw how easily it would be to ask Americans with closed hearts to open them.
Kids have this unique superpower to be able to do that. They help the adults around them open up. They can ask direct questions that, maybe as we get older, we learn are more taboo or culturally wrong, frowned upon. You have young children yourself. I wonder if you could talk about their reaction to the recent Nashville Covenant School shooting and how that has impacted your motivation to act now.
Thanks. Well, when we all got the news as parents in the school, it's worth noting that I started the school where my kids go to school. Part of my efforts as an activism and a band leader and community person also move into the educational space. So about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I helped a new nonprofit school charter. I became the chairman of the board. I did a lot of fundraising, and I called a lot of parents to say, hey, I'm starting a school. Come to this school. It's in trailers, but soon it'll have a building. It has 16 kids, but soon it'll have 160 if you come. It was a really challenging project and a beautiful one. So the shooting resonates with me on sort of two sides of the pickup line, both getting my kid in front of the school and then knowing how the school is operating in the wake of this tragedy. And one of the things that was so shocking was seeing the parents' eyes full of tears at the pickup line at 3:00 on Monday, the 27th, after the murders happened, and knowing that the kids didn't know yet, because the school elected to allow the parents to be the first part of saying what happened. And it was that moment of the lapse, the lag time in information when one side of the world is all crying, and then the other side, the precious, pure, innocent side, is all laughing and smiling, and they have not opened Pandora's box. They have not been awoken to a reality in which they need to be afraid to walk in the school. The hallways are death traps. The classrooms are the last line of defense. And so to see the kids poised in that moment, knowing that I was on the other side, was just really powerful.
Just listening to the song that you opened with, it reminds me of the power of music to not just help us process our grief and our emotions, but also just feel so much more powerful, even if it's an illusion. So, what I'm trying to say is that you can sometimes, feel like you have no power to do anything. And then you hear a song like that and you think, hey, you know what? Yeah, there is something I can do to change this situation. I wonder if you could tell us about sort of how you use music to help your own kids or the kids at the school deal with this anxiety of walking in every day to learn in a place that, you just mentioned can be really kind of a death trap.
One thing that makes me think of is how so many schools across Nashville began their first active shooter training programs, like a fire drill, in their schools in the wake of the shooting at Covenant. And one of the schools up the street from ours, a public school, I was talking with some parents at their school, and it just struck me how one of the moms said, "Yeah, when Stephen was asked to go into the closet and he got scared in his classroom, as they, imagined and reacted to a supposed threat, and he got scared. The teacher told him to just sing any song and just keep singing until it's over." And another way, I think that, like my kids who also participated in active shooter training, my daughter came home from school. I talk about this in the op-ed piece, and I said, "How was active shooter training?" And she said, "Oh, it was kind of weird, but I got a bad spot. Like if there had been a shooter, my butt was like kind of sticking out of the desk, and I would have got shot." And so I think in that comment, there's a kind of performative acceptance and laughing it away, which is the same thing that music does. Now, this is terrible stuff, and it's shocking for a kid to think, the door is going to get knocked down and I'm going to die today. But if instead you think little things like, "Yeah, my butt's sticking out," is a way of finding comfort in a new dawn of great discomfort. It's normalizing it, and that's what music does. The sing-song cadence, the putting into a lilting tone, allows us to let our voice be carried somewhere else where these things might get resolved.
I think that's one of the reasons we get so attached to musicians, even idolizing them. We feel this closeness. I've certainly had the experience of going and seeing a musician play live whom I adore and feeling just so privileged to be, breathing the same air as that person, which I don't feel when I meet, say, a neuroscientist I admire or someone else that hasn't taken me on that close emotional journey. Why do you think music has such a power to make us almost fall in love with the musicians who play it?
Well, I think it's like you say, whenever we're the voice that seems to get to be the ones that reaches God's ears, then, we've become the preacher in the room. I'd like to ask you a question about the way that opera does this. When I think about some of the librettos that I'm familiar with, they seem to have such a reflection of a topical narrative. They tell the story of people in the world that they're inhabiting. And do you think that opera similarly has the same methodology to kind of to make the profound accessible to us by putting it into human terms?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for asking that. I think that opera really tackles the sort of really big emotional stories. So sometimes when someone says to me, oh, I want to write an opera about X, and it's kind of banal or everyday, I think, well, that's probably not an opera, right? That might be some kind of other musical piece. But opera really has these like grand emotions, grand events. It's grand theater. And one of the things that makes it, I think, really powerful is that it's unamplified. So there's nothing between you and the singer. And that's why these big emotions that come out in these trained voices to fill an entire hall can feel so powerful and so visceral. But for some people, it feels like artifice because it doesn't sound like talking. And so, oftentimes pop music or country music or music that is really makes you feel like you're in the room with the person, that, you're sitting around, you're having a beer or, eating a hot dog and you're kind of chit-chatting. There's a place for that, and I think that that's every day. Whereas I think for opera, it's kind of, it's relegated to an exceptional experience. That's why you kind of have to sometimes do your homework to figure out what the story is about, because maybe it's in a different language, but there's also, all the show. But yeah, that's what I think. What do you think?
I see it pretty much as just another page of the same musical score that includes rock and roll and includes every popular music form, country or whatever, hip hop, because it's about a gathering of people looking to the stage to better understand themselves, to one, be entertained, the theatrics of it, and also that lamentation that I've got the blues. And when I think about the history of, I think they say that about 40,000 years ago, you find the first musical instruments, and that there are these flutes made of bone. And, therein lies the future of all of the different ways in which we are going to use music as a species to bring people together. And it might not, there's a clannishness to music too. Every army has their own battle hymn. And that sort of denotes the ways in which music can be so divisive. I think that with country is currently in a real safe space in which, instead of talking about anything divisive, the new division is to not talk about anything at all. Imagine the opera that didn't have heavy-hitting lyricism, that didn't explore complex relationships of betrayal and loss. But instead, everybody sort of drove around like a Hallmark card of aphorisms and sipped on immediate, gratification.
Yeah, there are some more modern operas that are like that, and I feel like they don't reach the audience that, the big sweeping stories do. And I love your reference to the bird-bone flute 40,000 years ago, but I would go even further and say that 1.5 million years ago, our early human ancestors discovered fire, and so they started sitting around creating social groups. And language didn't come around for another million years. And so, I make the argument that in those million years, that's really when music became the main way in which we shared our feelings, whether it was like using our bodies as percussion instruments or exchanging calls that have an emotional significance. So, yeah, I think and you're exactly right that there is this grouping nature of music. I don't want to use the word tribal, but in the past people have, to sort of make the sense that, you identify with the kind of music that you love. And it's not just that you don't like or don't care for someone else's music, but you can actively hate that kind of music, that it's like an active negative emotion. One of the reasons I think why what you've been doing is so powerful is that you were calling on musicians that have such a power to pull people together to act. And it's in contrast to the culture in the South where country music reigns. Can you tell us about what the reaction has been, either from other musicians or your fans, or how are people reacting to your call for Nashville musicians in particular to stand up against gun culture?
It's been a pretty positive response, I was at an event last night for the victims of Covenant School shooting, and this was a fundraiser at Belmont University, and I saw singers who have #1 hits and legions of followers, and one in particular pulled me aside and said, "Thanks for writing this article. It really is true." And I thought I was glad that this person said that, and I felt flattered that I had written something so rabble-rousing that could have been heard by somebody who, is heard in the camo aisle at the Walmart, on the speaker, or the Cabela's, or the, but then I thought, as I walked towards the stage, what are you going to do about it? So you like it, so you think it was brave and bold, but what are you going to do about it? Because I can only go so far. I might have wrote a popular song that's made it into the national consciousness, and it really has. I mean, that song has really been very powerful, and largely because of another performer's use of that song, which has really tripled the reach of that song into the mainstream space. But as a songwriter, I'm sort of asking the people that are the headliners to go out on a limb here, because I can only go out on the limb so far. But there's also been some feedback that's really negative, and how dare you? And I think that as Nashville moved from we are all crying in the pickup line to we are all walking out of our schools today, we are in a student-led protest. The third sort of wave of this was the state legislature is now going to kick out these 3 elected officials because of their behavior about civil disobedience, protest, about raising awareness about gun violence. And, that was really hard to bear witness to, because to me that was basically, it was like me calling up a country singer and saying, "Hey, did you like my piece?" And them saying, "That piece is garbage, and you should be, they should kick you off the stage for saying that kind of incendiary, inflammatory, negative, that's what people get canceled for, So I see the threat in Nashville, and I think it's more aptly placed in the space of legislation than it is about, the Dixie Chicks being canceled because of what they said 20 years ago. I think we're living in a different time in which artists have a lot more freedom. But then again, we're also living in a time when Democrats in the state of Tennessee have a lot less. I don't know which one's better.
So what is the change that you would want to see? What do you hope is the outcome of this bold step that you're taking that, let's be honest, could cost you part of your career?
Oh, well, I play the fiddle for a living and the banjo, and I sing, and I'll have a career whatever it is. And I get to, it's fun. I'm in a new chapter of my career because I get to talk in conversations like this with you and in others where I'm getting to move into a new space. That maybe there's a pathway for me for something different, and I can accept if it has to change. I like to think about our gun culture in 2023 from a bird's eye view, hovering high above space and time. And I think I do that because I have a child the same age as the 3 children who were slain in my hometown 2 weeks ago, who simply walked into their classrooms and died because of a mentally ill person's decision to purchase a easily accessed military grade weapon brought to the school murdered 6 people in 17 minutes before they themselves were killed by law enforcement. Because now we're into the 100th of these and plus of these episodes, just in this own calendar year, and it's only April. To me, when my bird's eye view looks down upon this landscape, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I believe this will be a thing of the past. And I look at my kids, and I know that they are the ones who are going to ensure that it will be. This generation of mine, the Gen Xers and the millennials, we might not be able to get it done. But I know that the kids going to school today, for whom there has been no other reality. My kid will never forget that, oh yeah, in 2023, when I was in the 3rd grade, I was just like the kids mowed down in a school across town. Nothing was the same after that, Pop. And we were going to make sure that we were the generation that solved this.
Yeah, and your kid's already working on it. You want to show us their protest poster?
Yeah, I do want to show you their protest poster because I brought it here. This is from my 5th grader. I'm going to flash it across so you can read it.
ABC, not GUN. That's great. And I love how it's manufactured on clearly what was around at home at the time. That's great.
Yeah, and seeing my child walk out of school, seeing my 3rd grader walk out of school it was a silent walk around the block. Nashville, Tennessee is a place where the architects of the civil rights movement gathered in 1958 to 1963 or so, and fleshed out this idea of, we're going to go deeper south. We're going to take this to the Woolworths parking lots and counters. We're going to take this to the churches and schools and downtowns, and we're going to take it to the jails, and we're going to do this with kids. This is going to be a teenage-led movement. I look across the country and I see the ways that teenagers are standing up and saying, with their homemade signs, "Am I next?" and challenging elected officials who they don't have the power to change the roles of. But standing up there and saying, "Am I next?" is the same act of civil disobedience that led to the Equality and Voting Acts and women's suffrage, which started in Nashville, Tennessee. It wouldn't be women's suffrage. We cast a deciding vote here in backwards Tennessee to make sure that women had the right to vote 100 years ago. We are a bellwether place in the Mid-South. It's not the Deep South. We are a city of colleges and universities, of media, of folks that are highly educated and know the ways of the world. I think Nashville is uniquely poised to lead the way.
Well, Ketch, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your story and your insights and your powerful advocacy. I think you're right. I think that this next generation is going to stand up and be the change that we all want to see. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's good. It's great to be on this show with you.
And I'm Indre Viskontas for One Mind. Thank all of you for joining us.